Hello and welcome to World Talks, where every word matters. I'm Anna Kalczynska. Good evening. A mutual defense treaty between Russia and Belarus, signed in Minsk, will make it possible to reliably protect the security of Russia and Belarus, said Vladimir Putin. Russian president went on to say that it was up to Belarus, which borders with Poland, Lithuania and Latvia, to pick the targets for the potential use of Oreshnik, the intermediate-range hypersonic missile, which the Russians plan to redeploy on the territory of its ally Belarus in the second half of next year. To discuss the geopolitical situation related to relationships between Russia and Belarus, as well as internal politics, I'm joined by Pavel Slunkin, Policy Fellow, European Council of Foreign Relations. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I was going to ask you about the autonomy of Belarus regarding its involvement in Russia's war with Ukraine, but I should rather ask about its dependency on Moscow.
Well, we can view this issue on different levels. If we start with economy, which is the main factor that drives the bilateral relations, we can see that 95% of Belarusian export depends on Russia. So 65% of Belarusian export goods go to the Russian market. 35% or 30% of the rest of the goods that go to the third countries, they just depend on Russia's infrastructure, like seaports, gas, logistics there. Just because of the sanctions, they blocked the way to Klaipėda port in Lithuania, to Odessa port after the war, to Polish ports. So in the economic sphere, I usually say that Belarus economy can be switched off by Russia just as easy, because the macroeconomic stability depends on Kremlin's decision whether they are going to support it or not.
Does that translate immediately into policy, foreign policy?
Well, we can just see what happened when Russia is not happy with political decisions by any government abroad, what instruments they use to make the other states change it. We have experienced this in Ukraine, we have experienced this in Baltic states, we have experienced this in many post-Soviet countries, including Belarus, where there were issues when Belarusian government were trying to neutralize, to balance their foreign politics, and then Russia would put on the table the issues from the economy. Some of the goods would be labeled as not good enough to be in the Russian market. And then the talks begin. And then the political steps that were Russia wasn't happy with, they would be rolled back.
As I said, the Oreshnik missile might be redeployed to Belarus in the second part of 2025. So what is the implication of Russia's growing military presence in Belarus for the neighboring countries?
Well, I think that for the neighboring countries, it doesn't mean really much. I think this is the whole play that Russia is doing against the Western states. So it is not just about Russia and Belarus, it's the play against the Western domination in Europe and Russia's desire to have more influence there. So they are manipulating Western politics in accordance to in Ukraine and in the region. And this is the play with two partners, where Russia would be deploying some of the weapons and saying, like, creating this gray zone of misunderstanding whether these weapons will be used by Russia or also by Lukashenko. So creating some of kind of unpredictability to create a nervous atmosphere in the West. But in terms of military dependence of Belarus, it has already been seen how dependent it is after Lukashenko allowed to invade Ukraine from the territory of Belarus. It's not like really growing, and the main implication for the Belarusian people, I would say, is not right now. It is mostly about the future, when Belarus will have, or hopefully will have, the chance to become a democratic country, when Russia will have to withdraw, but then we will be having all these issues like nuclear arms, maybe Russian military bases in Belarus, and including Oreshnik.
Exactly. So let's move now to the internal politics a bit, but everything is linked here. But given the Belarusian regime's close alignment with Moscow, how can the EU effectively cooperate with the civil society inside Belarus? And what's the mood now, and what are the hopes of the opposition?
Well, it's very hard. It's very hard. Most, like, Belarusian civil society doesn't really exist anymore in Belarus. That's the problem. They all live in emigration, in exile, and they are supported by European donors. And their positions in Belarus, their influence in Belarus are decreasing because of the practices that the Belarusian government is doing against the people with alternative views. And that is a huge issue, because the main ally of democracy, the main ally of European partners in Belarus are the people. This is what we have seen in the streets of Belarus. This didn't really change in this way. So people of Belarus still want change. They live, some part of these people now live in exile. Part of the people have to be silenced in the country. And if we stop supporting them, this will mean that the whole civil society that has grown up in a so strong mood, in strong shape that we have seen and observed in 2020, now will be destroyed. Because before, when they walked in Belarus, they could rely on readers, they could rely on businesses, they could rely on advertisements, they could grow up and become stronger and stronger. Now, any wrong like on Facebook or any wrong comment, any wrong video on TikTok would bring a person, an individual, to prison. So people stop doing that. But does that mean that they have changed their opinions? And the people who can speak, they live abroad. But without support from Western partners, this will just cease to exist.
Well, the Western parties try and do what can be done, basically, with the fifth package now of sanctions, sanctioning people who are in power and are the officials enabling Putin to conduct this war of attrition with Ukraine. But how does it impact Belarus? And is this people in power, is this party in power around Lukashenko a solid group, or can they be somehow divided with these sanctions, for instance?
Oh, well, I think that they're pretty solid, but of course there are different parts of interest. Some of their officials who are still being part of their Lukashenko's regime, they are less pro-Russian. They still want Belarus to be independent. They still want Belarus to be more neutral.
Can they be played on this card of independence?
I think it's pretty hard to play now, because the main decision maker and the only decision maker now in Belarus is Lukashenko. If someone does something wrong or incorrect according to his views, this can have like very bad effects to the people that could bring them to prison. And the problem is that the opposing group, the one that is pro-Ruski Mir, pro-Russian, they are special services. So they are the one who are monitoring all their media, all the society, checking whether there are some dissent in the society. And if they see specifically among the officials, among bureaucrats, some kind of a dissent or alternative views, they would punish that. Just because this group is stronger in terms of force and how they can use it against others. But yeah, I think that, again, as I can repeat what I have said, we have allies in Belarus, millions of people who still want change, and this is the way how we can influence the situation. If we support the visa regime, their facilitation of people's traveling abroad, they know where to live better. They know who and where the future of Belarus belongs to. They want communication with their relative who lives in exile, just like me. So many interests of Belarusians lie in Europe, and if we build a wall between Belarus, Poland, and the Baltic states, this would just help Russia to take Belarus over.
Exactly. So do you think that the sanctions have the desired effect, or are they counterproductive? Well,
they obviously have side effects, but the reason for sanctions is not because we want to isolate Belarus, right? So this is the reaction for what Lukashenko has been doing for all these years. And I think that Lukashenko pretty well knows what is expected him to do, like any basic steps to release political prisoners, to stop repression, at least this. I'm not even talking about the new democratic elections, right?
Of course.
But he's not doing that. Since July, we have seen 8 waves of release of political prisoners. So around 25, 30 people would be in every round. They were released. But the problem is that the repression continuing, and we still have 1,300 political prisoners right now. But this is, I think, the sign of the regime and Lukashenko himself want to play around their so-called elections that we will hold on January 26, then trying to re-establish, to bring some thaw in the relations with the Western capitals, hoping that it will bring some positive impulse without any real changes in domestic politics.
Pavel Slunkin, thank you very much, sir. Unfortunately, we have to put a full stop here, but there are many, many issues to tackle still. And, well, hope is there. However, the situation is really grim. That's true. Thank you very much. Pavel Slunkin, Policy Fellow, European Council of Foreign Relations, was our guest tonight. And that concludes this edition of World Talk. Please stay tuned to TVP World. Thanks for watching.